In this video, we are going to study cultural studies through referring many key figures like Raymond Williams, Stuart Hall, P Thompson, Marshall Mcluhan, John Fiske, and Stephen Greenblatt. Cultural studies is actually an interdisciplinary area which examines the ways in which culture creates and transforms individual experiences, everyday life, social relations, and power structures. It draws from sociology, anthropology, literary theory, and media studies to analyze how cultural practices relate to societal issues like class, gender, race, and identity. So, by focusing on the relationships between culture, politics, and power, culture studies seeks to understand how meanings are produced and how they shape the world. The Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies, CCCS, founded in 1964 at the University of Birmingham by Richard Hogarth, which played a pivotal role in the development of cultural studies as an academic field. Led by the scholars like Stuart Hall, the CCCS was renowned for its radical critical approach to analyzing media, popular culture, and social movements. This actually introduced the important concepts such as hegemony, subcultures, and representation, which have become central to culture studies. The CCCS aimed to explore how culture functions as a form of social control and resistance, offering an intellectual framework for understanding the intersection of culture and power in contemporary society. So now let's look at Raymond Williams. Who is Raymond Williams and his influence in cultural studies? Raymond Williams was a key figure in the development of cultural studies, especially in Britain, and made significant contributions to understanding the relationship between culture, society, and power. Some of his key concepts are: he argued that culture is not limited to high art or elite practices, but it is ordinary and part of everyday life. So he is the one who argued culture as ordinary. This idea democratized the concept of culture, bringing attention to the everyday experience of people, their practices, and values. He also developed the concept of cultural materialism, which emphasizes that culture cannot be separated from its material conditions. He argued that cultural practices and artifacts are shaped by their social, economic, and political contexts. Some of his key texts are Culture and Society, which was published in 1958, in which he explores how the idea of culture evolved from the late 18th century to the modern period, especially in relation to industrialization and social change. The Long Revolution, which was also published during 1961, which discusses the interconnections between social, political, and cultural changes, framing culture as an integral part of social revolution. Keywords, another text which was published during 1976, which is a study of keywords in the English language, tracing their historical evolution to show how changes in language reflect broader cultural and societal shifts. He also gives some study, or he studied hegemony and counter-hegemony, building on Antonio Gramsci's theory of hegemony. Raymond Williams emphasized that culture is a site of struggle where dominant ideologies are contested and while alternative, resistant cultural forms emerge. And he critiqued the traditional Marxist view of the relationship between the economic base and cultural superstructure. He argued for a more complex, interactive relationship between the two, emphasizing the role of human agency in shaping both economic and cultural life. So he critiqued base and superstructure. And he introduced the idea of structure of feeling, referring to the lived experience and emotional responses of a particular period that are not fully articulated in formal cultural forms, but influence the collective consciousness of society. He recognized the importance of popular culture and mass media in shaping social consciousness, challenging the idea that only high culture, quote-unquote high culture, was worth study. He explored how television and other forms of mass communication serve as tools for both reinforcing and challenging dominant ideologies. So he was instrumental in the institutionalization of cultural studies as an academic discipline. So what are the key terms or key points he gave us? He developed the concept of cultural materialism, as well as he introduced the idea of structure of feeling. Don't forget these two. Let's look at his influential works. Some of his influential works include Culture and Society, which was published in 1958, The Long Revolution during 1961, and other notable works are Communications, which was published in 1962, the English novel From Dickens to Lawrence, which was published during 1970, Country and City, 1973, Keywords, a Vocabulary of Culture and Society, 1976, Literature and Marxism, 1977, Television, Technology and Cultural Form, 1974, which is actually co-authored with Raymond Williams, Towards 2000, published in 1983, Resources of Hope, Culture, Democracy, Socialism, published in 1989, Writing in Society, which is published in 1984. So Raymond Williams is a key figure in cultural studies. Now, E.P. Thompson. Thompson is best known for his book, The Making of the English Working Class, which is published in 1963, just 1 year before CCCS was founded. And in this book, where he introduced a new way of understanding history from the perspective of ordinary people rather than just elites. So just like Raymond Williams, Thompson also focused on ordinary people rather than elites. Thompson's work laid the groundwork for the concept of cultural materialism, emphasizing the interplay between culture, economics, and politics. He critiqued the deterministic aspects of Marxist theory, arguing that human agency, culture, and consciousness played crucial roles in historical development. So this approach made him a key figure in the development of socialist humanism. He introduced the idea of moral economy, which refers to the traditional community-based norms and values that guided economic behavior, particularly among the poor. He used this concept to explain popular resistance to market forms such as food riots. Thompson was also a critic of structuralism and Althusserian Marxism, emphasizing instead the importance of historical specificity and the lived experiences of people in shaping social cultures. Now let's look at his influential works. The famous one is none other than The Making of the English Working Class, published in 1963. Other notable works are Customs in Common, Studies in Traditional Popular Culture, published in 1991. The Poverty of Theory and Other Essays, published in 1978. Witness Against the Beast, William Blake and the Moral Law, published in 1993. Whigs and Hunters, The Origin of the Black Cat, published in 1975. The Romantics, England in a Revolutionary Age, which is actually a posthumous publication, published in 1997. Writing by Candlelight, published in 1980. So it's very clear these works by E.P. Thompson are critical to understanding his contributions to cultural studies, particularly in how they emphasize the role of culture in shaping historical and social processes. Now, let's look at Stuart Hall. He is a founding member of Cultural Studies, and he was a co-founder of the Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies, CCCS. And one of the major contribution by Stuart Hall is his theory of encoding and decoding. Hall's theory of encoding and decoding, presented in his 1973 essay, quote-unquote, Encoding and Decoding in the Television Discourse, revolutionized media studies. He argued that media messages are encoded by producers with intended meanings, but audiences decode these meanings in various ways based on their own cultural backgrounds, leading to different interpretations. And he gave the concept of cultural identity. His work on cultural identity, particularly in his essay, quote-unquote, Cultural Identity and Diaspora, published in 1990, emphasized the fluid and dynamic nature of identity. He analyzed how race is socially constructed and how racism is embedded in everyday practices and institutions. So his work challenged the essentialist notions of race and emphasized the role of culture in shaping racial identities. He also gave articulation theory. He developed the concept of articulation, which refers to the process by which different social forces are connected in specific historical contexts. So this concept was crucial in understanding how cultural forms and practices are linked to broader social and political dynamics. He emphasized the importance of studying popular culture, arguing that it is a key site where ideologies are produced, reproduced, and contested. He believed that popular culture could be a space for resistance as well as domination. So now let's look at his influential works, which actually includes essays, articles, posthumous publications, and documentaries and films. Some of his notable works are The Popular Arts, which is published in 1964, and it is co-authored with Paddy Vanel. Resistance Through Rituals, Youth Subcultures in Post-War Britain, which is published in 1975 and which is co-edited with Tony Jefferson. Policing the Crisis, Mugging the State and Law and Order, which is published in 1978 and co-authored with Cass Critchard, Tony Jefferson, John Clark, and Brian Roberts. Culture, Media, Language, Working Papers in Culture Studies, which is published in 1918, co-edited with many, including Dorothy Hobson, Andrew Lowe, and Paul Willis. The Hard Road to Renewal, Thatcherism and the Crisis of the Left, which is published in 1988. Representation, Cultural Representations and Signifying Practices, which is published in 1997, edited by Stuart Hall. Questions of Cultural Identity, which is published in 1996, co-edited with Paul Duguay. Critical Dialogues in Cultural Studies, published in 1996, co-edited with David Morley and Quan Singh. The Fateful Triangle, Race, Ethnicity, Nation, which is published in 2017, which is actually edited posthumously. And the other essays and articles including, and here actually these essays and articles are more important than the works. Encoding and Decoding the Television Discourse, which is published in 1973. Cultural Studies, Two Paradigms, published in 1918. The Rediscovery of Ideology, Return of the Repressed in Media Studies, published in 1981. Cultural Identity and Diaspora, published in 1990. The Question of Cultural Identity, published in 1992. New Ethnicities, published in 1989. Gramsci's Relevance for the Study of Race and Ethnicity, published in 1986. And Notes on Deconstructing the Popular, which is a very famous essay, which is published in 1981. The posthumous publications include The Fateful Triangle, Selected Political Writings, and Familiar Stranger. And there are documentaries and films too. The Stuart Hall Project, which is actually published in 2013, released in 2013, which is directed by John. This documentary is actually an audio-visual portrait of Hall's life and ideas. Now let's look at John Fiske. Fiske is well known for arguing that popular culture is a site of struggle where ordinary people resist the dominant ideologies imposed by the ruling classes. He emphasized the importance of audience in interpreting media texts. He introduced the concept of polysemy, which refers to the idea that texts have multiple meanings and that different audiences can interpret the same text in varied ways based on their own social and cultural context. He challenged the traditional distinction between high and low culture, arguing that popular culture, often dismissed as trivial or commercial, plays a crucial role in everyday life, and that can be a site of significant social and political resistance. He borrowed the concept of bricolage from anthropology to describe how audiences construct their own meanings by piecing together elements from different cultural sources. His important works include Television Culture, which is published in 1987. It is one of his most influential works, and this book analyzes how television as a medium produces and reflects popular culture, offering insights into how audiences interpret media texts. Understanding Popular Culture, which is published in 1989, is also an important work. in which he explores how everyday popular culture can be a site of resistance and how audiences actively participate in creating meaning from cultural texts. Reading the Popular, which is published in 1989, is a very important work which can be a companion to understanding, which is actually a companion to understanding popular culture. And this book looks at popular culture and its connection to social power, ideology, and resistance. Media Matters, Race and Gender in US Politics, published in 1994. In this book, he investigates the role of media in shaping race and gender discourse in US politics. Power Plays, Power Works, which is also an important work, which is published in 1993, where he studies how power operates in culture, specifically through media and popular culture, and how people resist or challenge dominant ideologies. So it's very clear that these works have been foundational in the study of media and popular culture, particularly how audiences engage with and interpret media texts. Now you have Marshall McLuhan. His famous for coining the phrase, "the medium is the message." He argued that the form of a medium, for example, television or radio or print, which shapes and controls the scale and form of human association and action, not just the content it delivers. He predicted the rise of global village through electronic media, where instant communication technologies would make the world interconnected and bring people together, resembling the communal ways of pre-literate societies. Also, he classified media into hot and cool types, where hot media means it provides a high degree of information and require less audience participation, for example, radio or film. And cool media, which require more audience involvement to fill in details, for example, television, telephone, etc. McLuhan is associated with technological determinism, the idea that technology itself drives social and cultural changes rather than being shaped by society. He developed the tetrad of media effects to analyze the impact of new media. It consists of 4 questions, which include: what does the medium enhance? What does it make obsolete? What does it retrieve from the past? What does it reverse into when pushed to the extreme? So all these questions which helped him to develop the tetrad of media effects. Understanding Media, The Extensions of Man is a work which is published in 1964, is one of his most influential works, where he explored how different media extend human senses and abilities, impacting cultural and societal development. Other major works include The Mechanical Bride, Folklore of Industrial Man, published in 1951, The Gutenberg Galaxy, The Making of Typographic Man, which is published in 1962, The Medium is the Massage, An Inventory of Effects, which is published in 1967 with Quentin Faure, War and Peace in the Global Village, which is published in 1968, again with Quentin Faure, Culture is Our Business, which is published in 1970, From Cliche to Archetype, which is published in 1970, again with Wilfred Watson, Take Today, The Executive Was Dropout, which is published in 1972 with Barrington Nevitt, and posthumous collections and works include The Loss of Media, The New Science, which is published in 1988 with Eric Mcluhan, The Global Village, Transformations in the World, Life and Media in the 21st Century, which is published in 1989 with Bruce R. Pass. Now we already discussed Raymond Williams, Stuart Hall, P Thompson, John Fiske. So it's a high time to discuss Stephen Greenblatt, who is considered the founding figure of New Historicism, which is an approach that examines literature in relation to the historical and cultural context in which it was produced. Stephen Greenblatt is an acclaimed Shakespeare scholar. His book, Will in the World, How Shakespeare Became Shakespeare, which is published in 2004, is one of his best-known works, blending biography and historical context to explore Shakespeare's life and the conditions that influenced his works. And in his influential work, Renaissance Self-Fashioning, which is published in 1918, he introduced the idea of self-fashioning, exploring how Renaissance authors like Shakespeare, Moore, and others crafted their identities and reflected the political and social tensions of their time. And his more recent work like The Swerve, How the World Became Modern, which is published in 2011, studies the role of materialist philosophy and its influence on Renaissance thought, demonstrating how ancient texts shaped modern intellectual life. And this work won the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award. Other notable works of Stephen Greenblatt include Shakespearean Negotiations, The Circulation of Social Energy in Renaissance England, which is published in 1988, Marvelous Possessions, The Wonder of the New World, which is published in 1991, Practicing the New Historicism, which is published in 2000 with Catherine Gallagher, Learning to Curse, Essays in Early Modern Culture, which is published in 1990, Cultural Mobility, a Manifesto, which is published in 2010, The Greenblatt Reader, which is published in 2005. So that's all about cultural studies.